We set a record for questions on a Mailbag Friday, so let's dive into them next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can give me a follow on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Also, very easy to find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, and we are on YouTube. Just about 45 subscribers or so away from 800. Our goal is to get to 1,000 by opening day 2024. We're also live on TikTok and Instagram. You can follow us there at locked_on_Royals. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. There is no better time to go and get in on the action. Create your account and start betting before the NFL double headers that are going to be happening, the triple headers. We got games on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then, of course, college basketball and college football sprinkled in throughout that. So go and create your account and start placing some bets today. If you're a first-time listener, of course, welcome in. We always love new listeners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you want to know a little bit more about me, well, I do work in sports. I work here in Kansas City at Sports Radio 810 WHB. Got a show once a week over there. And then I also work for ESPN Kansas City, kind of under the same umbrella. Got a show Monday through Friday, 10 to 11 a.m. every single day. So if you ever want to catch me there, listen to all things sports, very easy to find me on those platforms. But when you come here, you know that you're getting Royals baseball for 30 straight minutes. And when you know it's a Friday, you know it's a Mailbag Friday. And we've got so many questions to get into. And as I teased it, we set a record for questions at a Mailbag Friday since I took over here on the Locked On Royals channel. We got 21 questions to get into. So that is basically going to take up our entire show, but not a bad thing at all, because I think there's a wide range of things to talk about, and those questions pretty much cover that. So let's not waste any time. I want to dive into question number one here, and this comes from JT Royals. He says, so I know you said the Royals aren't done yet. What possible moves could we expect the Royals to make? Another infielder or another bullpen arm? I'd imagine the next move is going to be that infielder they talked about, a left-handed infielder that can play multiple positions. I know on the podcast episode that I posted earlier today, was going to get up last night, but there were some technical difficulties. I brought up Tony Kemp as a possibility, and Tony Kemp actually liked that tweet that I put out, kind of indicating that the Royals should go after him if they want a left-handed infielder that can play multiple positions. So to me, that is the next domino to fall. I think they want to get a little bit more depth there. Curious if it'd be on a minor league deal or they'd have to get him to a major league deal, but that makes all the sense in the world to me. Then I do think one more bullpen piece is going to be added. I would probably say more so toward the minor league deal department. The Royals signed a couple of guys in Dan Altavilla, Tyler Duffy, Sam Long to minor league deals. There are still plenty of guys out there that you can kind of get on that minor league deal with an invite to spring training. So absolutely think that middle infielder, that super utility guy, left-handed bat is going to be the next piece added. Then I think they'll probably go the minor league deal route for another bullpen arm. Michael asked on Twitter, does Dairon Blanco actually have a place on the opening day roster? He is somebody that is continuing to get work in the Winter League. He's actually playing very well. I think I saw on Twitter yesterday, he's got about 19 stolen bases so far. So that's a weapon that you want to have off your bench. I think offensively, he's a lot better than people give him credit for. And it may come down to him and Drew Waters, because the question remains, what is the future for Drew Waters? I think more so than Dairon Blanco. Now, Dairon Blanco gives you that advantage on the base paths. He's a great bunter. I know that Matt Quatrero loves that. I know Mike Matheny also loved guys that could bunt, but Dairon Blanco kind of made a name for himself and putting down the suicide squeeze, the safety squeeze. He's a very, savvy base runner. That could be an extra edge over Drew Waters, but for right now, I think he's on the outside looking in. Could also be a trade candidate if they feel like they want to roll with Drew Waters. Alex asked on Twitter, do you think Christian Chamberlain can emerge and be that second lefty out of the bullpen? I would say for the most part that this bullpen is going to be anchored by those that are going to be on the opening day roster. Now, Christian Chamberlain, I think, will have a chance to get up to Kansas City at some point. But keep in mind, too, J.J. Picollo is pretty high on Anthony Veneziano. And Anthony Veneziano, I think, is going to get a lot of chances to compete in that bullpen. And you also got to factor in, do Jake Brentz and Josh Taylor factor into that conversation? But Veneziano, to me, has got that edge so far. So it's Will Smith as your number one lefty, then probably Veneziano, then it's Brentz and Taylor. Then you kind of get down to Christian Chamberlain. But he's got to have a hot start in Omaha before I can really start making some predictions on when he could join this Major League bullpen. Wick asked on Twitter, should the Royals bring back Greinke, especially if they can find a way to trade Lyles? I vote yes. I think I tweeted this out not too long ago that Zach Greinke is a guy that feels like he's either going to go to the Royals or to the Dodgers. Two teams he's played for. The Dodgers are very aggressive. They might want just a little bit of extra bullpen help. Could also see him going back to the Astros. I think he's going to go somewhere where he's familiar with. And the fact the Dodgers, went out and got Yamamoto, I kind of feel like it means a Royals reunion is more likely. But if he joins the team again, I don't see him being in the rotation. And maybe that matters to Zach Greinke. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I just have a hard time believing he wants to come back to baseball if it wasn't to start. Now, they could theoretically still salary dump Jordan Lyles, but to salary dump him for Zach Greinke, I'm just not sure it's that much better of a move. Jordan Lyles was terrible last year, but unfortunately, Zach wasn't much better. I guess I could say better, considering that Lyles was breaking franchise records for home runs allowed. He was getting close to the ERA record. But Zach Greinke doesn't really elevate your number 5 spot. I'd much rather see him in a long relief role. But I also think they want another lefty in the bullpen. So for now, I'm going to say no. I don't think that it would be a smart move to bring him back because it'd really only be to get him those 21 more strikeouts to get to 3,000 for his career. Next question we got here is from Moyer. He says, where does Nick Prato fit into the picture in 2024? Well, as for right now, I probably got to say in AAA. Right? I don't think he's going to take at-bats away from Vinny Pasquantino at first base. I don't think he needs to be taking at-bats away from Nelson Velasquez. Don't think he needs to be taking at-bats away from MJ Melendez. And I know there's people that say he's got gold glove defense over at first base. He really doesn't. Not good enough defense to have the bat like he did last year. So depth would be my best guess for this time. But there's also going to be other times throughout this season that maybe he does need to provide some depth, and maybe he has a hot start in spring training, but things do have to change for Nick Prato at the plate. Got to get a little bit more aggressive if he is to have a piece of this roster in 2024. Well, we still got about 14 or 15 more questions to get into. So let's take our first break of the show. When we come back, our Mailbag Friday continues on Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can give me a follow on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to the title sponsor today in FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. That's FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. So let's continue our Mailbag Friday. Still 2 more segments worth of questions that I want to get to, and we're going to start it off with Briley. He says, lots of talk on the Bobby Witt Jr. extension. How do we as a smaller market team keep big talent like that? Well, I know there's always going to be those arguments of small market, big market. How can the Royals ever afford a player like Shohei Ohtani? Really, they can't. Or a player like Yamamoto, really, they can't. But I would say small market teams can still keep their homegrown talent. And I think Bobby Witt Jr. is a guy that wants to stay here. And the Royals also understand only having, a few stars in their franchise's history. I mean, think about it. George Brett, superstar. You probably go in the pitching department. You think Brett Saberhagen, a star, a league-wide star. You go to maybe the early 2000s, late 90s, Carlos Beltran, was a bit of a star league-wide, but those teams were tough to watch. Then you get to, of course, the 2014, 15, 16 teams like Lorenzo Cain was maybe the star league-wide. Eric Hosmer was very recognizable, Salvador Perez, but not many times. Zach Greinke, I should probably throw in there. But not many times have they had stars. And I don't think they've had one like this since George Brett. You could argue Carlos Beltran because of the numbers that he put up early on in his career, and Bobby Witt Jr. is very comparable. I just think long-term, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be more of a foundational piece than Carlos Beltran ever was. So how you keep him, I mean, we talked about this yesterday a little bit. You kind of look at it at a 7 to 8 year deal that probably satisfies both parties. You get him locked down for a lot of years, and Bobby Witt Jr. still gets to test the market in free agency. So best of both worlds for him. He's going to get paid a hell of a lot of money in the first half of his career, and then when he hits free agency at 30 or 31, he's going to make a lot more money again. Maybe it comes from the Royals, maybe it doesn't. But I think to your question, how do you keep him? You got to prove you're a winner. And that's what they're trying to do this offseason, is show to Bobby Witt Jr., hey, we want to win while you're still really young here. We're not going to be that team that never spends money, that's going to trade you away when we're, a 100-loss team once again. You got to show you're willing to compete, because that is going to be a driving point if you want to keep Bobby Witt Jr. here long term. Next question we got here is from Tom. I get there is only so much money to go around and so much they can do, but if another starter falls into the $8 million a year range, could you see them taking on that for 1 year? Alex Cobb, Frankie Montas, Kyle Gibson. Well, Kyle Gibson's already signed. He signed with the Cardinals at the beginning of the offseason, so he's out. So that does leave Frankie Montas and Alex Cobb. I would say it's something to look into, but it really does feel like this rotation's set because J.J. McCullough has been very open, very honest about what they're planning to do, how much they're willing to spend. And the fact that after Waka happened, it was more so we feel really good of where we're at. I don't think they'd be looking to add another starter, especially when you're paying Jordan Lyles $8.5 million a year. I mean, I just have no inside information. I've got nobody telling me that Jordan Lyles is going to be on his way out. I thought early on in the year it was going to be that way, or I should say early on in the offseason, I thought it was going to be that way. But right now it feels like they think he's going to bounce back. And then if he doesn't, they'll cut bait and go with Lynch or Bubich or Alec Marsh. When it's the 5 spot, it's a little bit okay. It's not as dire as it was when he was the number 2 or number 3. So those are good options. I just don't see it being very likely for Kansas City. Next question we got is from Matthew. Any chance Matt Sauer gets a shot at the rotation in spring? Very interesting question here, but I'm going to lean no. Like I said, with the rotation, feels kind of set right now with Michael Waka at the top, Reagans or Lugo being the 2, and then the 3, of course, Brady Singer is the 4, then it's going to be Lyles as the 5. For Rule 5 picks, they're always going to get their start in the bullpen just because they're making a pretty significant jump. Matt Sauer hasn't pitched in the big leagues yet. Not saying he could never get in the rotation. Think about Brad Keller. Brad Keller started out in the bullpen, and then the team was so bad 2 months into the season, they flipped into the rotation, and he shined from there. And he shined the next year, and he was good in the COVID year, and then he's been bad for 3 straight years. So I'm not going to rule it out as a possibility down the road, but for 2024, I think it's safe to assume either Matt Sauer doesn't make this team or he's going to be a bullpen piece for the entire year. Next question we got is from Dominic. With Vinny telling us he's pretty much been in the MLB with a bad shoulder, do you think he's going to go scorch earth this year and put himself in heavy comeback player of the year candidacy? I think that's a great question, and I think it's one I'd be willing to bet on. I think we are going to see a monstrous season from Vinny Pasquantino. He's a guy that you've heard me time and time again say, highest floor of anybody on this team. Highest floor because even last year when you thought he was slumping a little bit, he was an above-average league hitter. That, to me, is already telling that he's been battling shoulder problems throughout his entire career, which we've known that year 1 and year 2 had an injury. Had an injury that sidelined him for either a significant amount of time or the entire season. When he's fully healthy, I really wonder what that power can do. I mean, you're talking about a 15 to 20 home run guy, maybe being a 25 to 30 home run guy. He really is the true thunder in that lineup they've been missing for quite some time. I would not be shocked in the slightest if he won comeback player of the year in 2024. SNKC asked any former Royals you would be interested in adding Whit, and that's Whit Merrifield, Jorge Soler, Aroldis Chapman. I'm not Matt Chapman, excuse me. Of course, Matt Chapman never played for the Royals. Chapman would be interesting. I just think we would have seen more movement on it than we really have heard anything. I think that Aroldis Chapman's probably going to go get a 2-year deal somewhere, a little bit more expensive than the Royals want. Whit Merrifield, I think, has played his last game as a member of the Royals. I don't see him, making this journey back. I think that the bridge got burned a little bit. I still think you should look at Whit Merrifield and really honor the way he played, what he gave a really bad franchise for a long time. And just because that one period of time, when it was all found out about the players that were not vaccinated, I don't think I should tarnish his name forever as a Royal, but I think that did burn some bridges because it showed to J.J. Picollo and guys in the front office, hey, we had a guy that was not willing to get vaxxed for us, but then vaxxed for another team if they were playing in meaningful games. So I don't see him coming back at any point for the rest of his career. Soler, they made their pick. They've got their DH. They've got their right fielder. There's nowhere else Jorge Soler could really play. They're not getting rid of MJ Melendez. They're not getting rid of Nelson Velasquez. They want to see what those two guys have. Soler, unfortunately for the Royals, played really bad in his last year here. They didn't get anything significant in the return, and now he's one of the better power-hitting DHs in the whole league. We at least saw it for 1 year, but it was a year the Royals lost a hell of a lot of games. So not Soler, not Witt. And for Chapman, I think he's going to make too much money, and the Royals aren't willing to give him that for a guy that's nearing the very end of his career. All right, we'll answer one more question here before we hit our second and final break of the show. This comes from Lou. How will the hot dog derby standings shake out this year? I'm a mustard guy, so I want Mustard to take home the trophy by the end of it. But, man, I'm trying to think back to last year. I don't even know if Mustard was in second place. I think Mustard got smoked now that I think about it. It is a very entertaining thing to watch at Kauffman Stadium. I just wish they had their own unique spin to it. Like, there's a lot of people that do the hot dog derby. You've got Washington, the President's Derby. That's funny to see. I love watching, when the little kids go in the little hot dog costumes and do the hot dog derby. I actually also like the fake one on the Jumbotron. That one, to me, brings back the nostalgia of my childhood. But it is entertaining. I can tell you, as a baseball guy, if the Royals are getting their butts kicked and I watch it, I'm not really caring about it. But being a Mustard guy, love the question, Lou. Mustard's got to bring it home this year. I'm very much looking forward to my first dog at the K this year, but I'm already thinking about it right now. A beer and a hot dog, necessities at a game, and another necessity is Mustard finishing first in the dog derby races at Kauffman Stadium in this upcoming 2024 season. All right, we're still not done in this record-breaking Mailbag Friday episode. We've got about 7 or 8 questions to get into before the show concludes, so let's take our final break and come back and answer some more questions on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and be sure to give me a follow on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Before we dive into any more questions, a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Let's dive right back into it and answer some more questions on the Mailbag Friday. I really got to hustle here. I think it's more than 7 or 8. We got this one from Royals fan forever. Which of the young minor league prospects do you expect to make the greatest impact in 2024? This is going to count. I think Will Klein is going to make a pretty big impact because he's banging on the doorstep of Kansas City. I'd imagine the first injury to happen or first guy to struggle, Will Klein will get one of those spots in the bullpen. Also could be Veneziano, but maybe it depends if a right-hander or a left-hander goes down with injury or struggles, because it's just going to happen in the 2024 season. More of an upside look. Boy, I love Chandler Champlain. I think he is somebody that is going to get some starts this year. He was fantastic in Double-A. Javier Vaz is another guy that I want to see in Kansas City as soon as possible. Being a 15th round pick, probably don't want to rush him. It would not shock me if Javier Vaz is going to be treated like Vinny Pasquantino was. Just give him as much work as you can in Double-A and Triple-A. There's no need to rush him. And the good thing is the Royals feel pretty solid with Kyle Isbell out there. But if Kyle Isbell struggles, maybe there's a door that opens for Javier Vaz. But to me, Will Klein probably top of the list just because he's banging on the door. And then probably Chandler Champlain would be my second one that I think is going to make a pretty big impact in 2024. Next question we got here is from RB Carr. Outfield seems jammed with the additions of Renfroe. Who has options remaining, and who can they carry? And can they carry more than 5 on the 26-man roster? Well, I think I mapped it out as I think they'll have, of course, MJ. They'll have Isbell. They'll have Renfroe. They'll have Velasquez, and they'll have Waters. I think those are the 5 they're going to carry, and they can because Velasquez is going to DH most of the time. You can have Drew Waters as your 4th outfielder, and then Garrett Hampson's kind of your 6th, right? Because he can play the outfield, but I'd imagine they want him more so in the infield between 3rd, short, and 2nd. But if they are going to move on from anybody, I feel like I've said this before, I think it's going to be Drew Waters. I think they're going to try to find some value there and get some extra pitching help for the minor league system. But they can carry more outfielders than you would think they could. There's no rule against that. And since some of these guys are flexible, I'd imagine that's what they're going to want to do moving into opening day. Chance asked on Twitter, do you think of the upcoming season and how it turns out for both him and his player and the team and their record will have a big impact on Bobby Witt Jr.'s contract extension and the possible length of it next offseason? Well, there still is a chance they get it done before opening day. But yes, I think if he has a breakout season, like an MVP type of season, I mean, the price tag is going to go way up. And I still think the Royals will want to meet that, but they may need to gamble on it now. The problem is Bobby Witt Jr. could be looking at that and saying, I'm not signing anything right now. I feel good about myself. I feel like I can have just a tear of a season, and then I'm going to be worth more than a lot of players in Major League Baseball. So if he has a great year, and let's say the Royals go to the playoffs, just speaking hypotheticals here, yeah, that price tag is going to go way up. But there still is time for the Royals to get something done before opening day coming up at the end of March. Millerman asked on Twitter, this team is pretty complete except center field. Who would you like the Royals to go get for that position spot? Or do you like Isbell or Waters? I like Kyle Isbell. I have really come around on Kyle Isbell. I'm willing to give him one more chance because center field just isn't that deep in free agency right now. Drew Waters, I think, can get there. If Kyle Isbell struggles, you probably give that spot to him. But I'm just looking for Kyle Isbell to be a league average bat. Be a league average bat. You're good enough defensively that gives you a lot of value for cheap in center field. I really think if that bat can come around, he has more protection. You're going to see a guy that is one of the more valuable defenders in the American League Central and maybe the majority of the American League. I mean, what's funny, Alec Thomas, center fielder for the Diamondbacks, was a worse version of Kyle Isbell last year, but we're talking about him as a young, great piece for Arizona. I know he's younger, but it's like if you're good defensively, you just have to be league average with your bat. I think Kyle Isbell can get one more chance at that, so I'm not really looking free agency trade or to Drew Waters. I think Kyle Isbell's my guy moving into the regular season. Some Devil 04 asked, do you think the Royals try to get Salvi, Velasquez, and Renfroe in the lineup regularly, or do you think they go for better defense against righties? I'd imagine those 3 are going to be in the lineup on a consistent basis, barring any craziness in spring training, whether that be Nick Prato tearing it up or Drew Waters tearing it up. With Salvi behind the plate, Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo mentioned he was a big reason why they chose Kansas City. Velasquez, you can hide him defensively by DHing him. But I also think that Melendez, Renfroe, and Velasquez are going to rotate a little bit between the outfield spots and the DH. I don't think the Royals are too overly concerned about Velasquez and Melendez. I think Melendez is going to be much better defensively because he's finally spent an entire offseason working on the outfield, not working on catching like he was last year. So I don't think the Royals are going to consider that too much when facing righties. You put your best bats in there, and I think you go forward from there. JDC asked on Twitter, can Q manage all this talent? Will the lineups have as much variety day to day? And could you see the Royals ending up with 6 guys hitting 16-plus home runs? For Q, hey, I'm excited to see this now because I don't think he really had a team to manage last year. There wasn't much to do with that team because there was so much inexperience. I'm excited to see how he manages, A, this lineup, B, this bullpen, because that's when I can really start evaluating how good a manager is. Second question you asked, is there going to be a lot of variety in the lineup? I still think some, but it all comes down to how hot this team is in April. If this team really gets off to a hot start in April, you've got that base of, we like this lineup. We like this lineup, and we're not willing to shake it around too much. We're not willing to shake it up. The Royals shook it up so much last year because nobody was consistent. Not until the second half. If you have guys settle into spots, then you've got your problems answered right there. I mean, you can take care of business, and there's no there's no problems. But I do think we're going to see some mixing and matching. Wouldn't be surprised if you have like days where Vinny Pasquantino hits second and then Bobby Wood Jr. hits second one day, or you hit Salvi third and then one day fifth. I could see some rearranging like that, but nothing too drastic. And then 6 guys that hit 16 plus home runs, I'll go Bobby Wood Jr., I'll go MJ Melendez, I'll go Velasquez, I'll go Renfroe. Did I say Salvi? I'm already blanking now. Bobby Wood Jr., Velasquez, MJ, Renfroe, Salvi, Pasquantino. There's my 6 right there. If I wanted to throw in one more, Massey got 15 last year, so maybe he could run into a couple more. But for now, I'd say probably 6 is a pretty good bet on that. Okay, we got 3 more. It should time out perfectly. Satchel Page asked on Twitter, if the Royals want to make a jump to being competitive in the Central this year, we want a Pat K again. Mahomes wants it. We all want it. Which players need to make the leap this season to make that dream become a reality? Very, very well thought out question there, and I love answering this one. MJ has got to step up. Kyle Isbell has to step up. Michael Massey has to step up. And my 4th guy, Brady Singer, has to step up. I feel good about Garcia, Bobby Wood Jr., Vinny, Salvi, Renfroe. The other guys, that changes this team if these guys are better than advertised. And I will guarantee you this team will make the postseason if those guys are much better than they were last year. Because I think the other guys around them, high floors. And that can make this team significantly more competitive. Last 2 we got here. This is from Aiden. Do you think the Royals will be willing to have the payroll even higher this year by extending Bobby Wood Jr.? Absolutely. If they can get that deal done this offseason, that's a dream scenario for them. They are not really worried about payroll right now. They're not really worried about being handcuffed because he's a guy that I think long-term you are willing to go the extra mile to give him that money because he's a superstar like we really haven't seen in Kansas City since either Beltran, if you want to be more of a early 2000s guy, but if you want to be a long-term guy here, maybe since George Brett. But another great question there from Aiden. And lastly, 150 Guacamole asked on Twitter, should the Royals hold off on trades until the next wave of free agents begin to sign, allowing us to gain extra players that have been DFA'd to comply with this 40-man roster rule? I will say that it might have been 2 weeks ago or something like that. What is it, December 22nd? Nope. It would have been at the beginning of December. I got asked on Twitter, when is the big move going to happen for the Royals? I said before Christmas. Well, all their big moves happen before Christmas. I think everything's going to be settled by Christmas time. Then you will see maybe over the course of, a few weeks in January, maybe early February, some minor league deal guys, spring training invites. But I just don't see a trade happening at this point anymore. I think they really exhausted that search. The Royals just don't have much to give. And I feel like they think their roster is all but set, but they want competition and they want depth in a lot of areas. So it's a good question, but I don't think they're waiting on anything anymore. I would be pretty shocked unless it's a deal like, Jordan Lyles in a salary dump like they did with Mike Minor going into 2022. If it was, maybe somebody like a Nick Lofton, trading because they feel like with Garrett Hampson, if they sign somebody else to be a super utility guy, maybe they want more value in trading somebody like Nick Lofton. That I could see. But once we get to Christmas Day here in a couple of days, I feel like everything will be pretty much settled and it will be quiet for quite some time. But that is going to do it for a Mailbag Friday segment, a record-breaking Mailbag Friday episode in which we had 21 questions. Glad I got to all of them. First time we've ever had all 3 segments dedicated to just questions, but I love it. Always love the feedback you guys give me. Always love the interactions that we have, whether it be on YouTube or it be on Twitter. Before we send things off into the weekend, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. You have a great weekend. Our schedule will be a little bit different next week. I'll try to get as many episodes in as I can because I will be out of town by the end of the week. So might be looking at a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday type of situation for all of our podcast episodes. But stay tuned on that. Follow me on Twitter and keep subscribing. But until next time, you take it easy, Kansas City.